All right, good afternoon. It is section 5-6, Algebra, solving equations. Okay, what I want you to do is go ahead and hit pause and copy this down. So go ahead and do that first. All right, so multiplicative inverse or reciprocals, that is meaning the exact same thing. And I know that last year you worked with what we call reciprocals. So I know that's not anything new to you. It is when two numbers with a product of 1. For example, 3/4, the reciprocal or multiplicative inverse would be literally flipping this fraction to be 4/3. And when you multiply them together, 12 over 12, that equals 1 whole. Okay? So when we look at this particular fraction, okay, this is a proper fraction. This would be a mixed number. The first thing you have to do for that is to first make it into an improper fraction. So 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 more to get your 7/3. And then you take the multiplicative inverse of that, or the reciprocal, which then flip that, gives you 3/7. Okay? We'll talk further about that when we do our equations. So let's look at this. Again, go ahead and hit pause and copy this down. All right, it says how to solve a division equation. And again, we're going to be using some of our previous skills that we have talked about. Inverse operation is one of them. So we have 7 equals n over 4. Okay, and so to do that, this means, again, division, n over 4. So since that's a division problem, we have to do that inverse operation. And so then we're going to multiply both sides by 4. So we do that by multiplying both sides by 4. And you can see I wrote that in red that you're doing to both sides. And then in blue, I'm using some cross-reducing to get that. And so that you will get n times 1, which is n, and 1 times 1 is 1, and any number divided by 1 is that number. That's how we got n by itself. So then it's simply 4 times 7, and you get 28. And then check your solution. So plug the value of the variable into the variable. So 28 divided by 4 does give me 7. Okay, so again, you're doing the inverse operation. Since it's got a 4 over here, since it says divide by 4, we're going to multiply by 4 to both sides. Now let's go ahead and hit pause and copy this down for multiplying equations. So when we multiply, we have 1/2 times a equals 8. Well, we're going to soon find out, and why we're talking about this now, is that you cannot literally divide by a fraction. So we can't do the inverse operation of dividing by 1/2. However, that's actually what you are doing. Okay. If you recall from last year, if it was 1/2 divided by 1/2, you actually had to take 1/2, change it to multiplication, reciprocal of the second number, and you get the 2 over 1. This then equals 1 whole. Okay, and that's what we're doing right here. We're trying to make that equal to 1. So we multiply by the multiplicative inverse both sides, and this equals, again, 1. So we get 1 times a is a. And now 8 times 2, which we had to put over 1. Okay, that was the 2 over 1. And 8 was a whole number, so we put that over 1 to make them both fractions. And now it's 8 times 2 is 16 over 1, which equals 16. And to check our solution, 1/2 times 16, or 1/2 of 16, equals 8, and it does. So let's look at solving some of these next few problems. Well, the first one says, actually the first 3 are going to be the same directions, which would be find the multiplicative inverse of each number. And that's all you're doing. So go ahead and hit pause and solve letter A. And the multiplicative inverse of this would be 5 over 1. Okay, you're just flipping that, literally flipping it so that the numerator is the denominator and denominator is now the numerator. Remember, if you cross-reduce, they should all be 1s to equal 1 whole. That's how you know if it's the correct inverse. Now go ahead and do letter B. Multiplicative inverse, this is already an improper fraction, so we flip it. And you get 3/4. Now let's look at our next. Go ahead and solve C. Now again, before we solve this, we must make this into an improper fraction first. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 more is 7/3. And then the multiplicative inverse, or reciprocal, would be 3/7. Okay, remember you have to make it into a fraction first, whether it's proper or improper. Then you can flip it. Okay, and obviously if it's a mixed number, you're always going to make it an improper fraction. Now let's look at solving these equations. So we have k divided by 16 equals 2. Go ahead and hit pause and solve. Well, again, this is a division problem, so we're going to multiply by the number that's with that variable, which is 16. So we're going to multiply this side by 16. These, if we make them into fractions, cancel out to be 1s. And so we get k equals 2 times 16, which is 32. And you can plug that 32 in, and 32 divided by 16, yes, it does equal 2. Let's look at our next. Go ahead and solve this. Okay, again, this is a division problem. We start on the side with our variable. So we're going to multiply by 3.6 over 1, which these would reduce to 1. This side times 3 6/10, so I'll use the multiplication sign. And so then we have to multiply those together to get our answer. So 3 6/10 times 5/10, and we get 30. And then we have 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 more is 18. And then we have 2 numbers to the right of the decimal, so we have 2 to the right in our answer, and we get 1 8/10. That is our answer. And again, plugging that into it, 1.8 over 3.6, that reduces, or we can divide that and you would get 0.5, or you can see that it reduces to 1/2, which equals 5/10. Let's look at our next one. Go ahead and hit pause and solve letter F. Now for letter F, this is a multiplication problem. You say, well, it's division, it has a fraction. True, but how is it in relation to this variable? This is actually a multiplication problem. So we're going to take the reciprocal of 3/8, which would be 8/3. So we multiply this side by 8/3. These all cross-reduce to get a by itself. And now we can cross-reduce here as well, which 8 goes into 40 equally, and 40 divided by 8 gives me 5. So we divide this by 3 and this by 3 to give me 4. And you see that we get 4/5 to be my answer. Okay, and you can always take 4/5, plug it back in, and yes, 3 times 4 is 12, and 8 times the 5 gives me 40. So 4/5 is the value of A. Now go ahead and hit pause and solve this one. This is a 6. Okay, again, this is a multiplication problem because the variable is not mixed in with that fraction itself. So we are going to multiply that side by 7/4 and this side by 7/4. So then we get k by itself with the cross reducing. And we have to make this into a fraction, so put it over 1. We can then cross reduce these by dividing by 2. So that's 2. This divided by 2 is 3. And I get 7 times 3 is 21 over 2. And then we would need to divide that. and you would see that k then equals 10 and 1/2. Or if you want to write it as a decimal, you're certainly welcome to do that as well to get 10.5, 10 and 5/10. Okay? Again, if you're having questions on how to solve these, please make note of that. We will talk about it further tomorrow. So have a great evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow.